Alright, let's see how long this lasts. Go to the camp. Look at the early birds. Had a whole litany of issues past couple of weeks, but we don't complain about that, right? We just got our work done and I got my work done. So it's all good. Try and use some of that for filler later on. Sorry, I'm just getting used to my shortcuts again because I've been using the computer. We'll get into that later. But let's just get right into the crits because I know that I think the majority of people that did submit a couple of weeks ago are probably not going to be able to make this stream. So just for you guys, I think we'll just dive straight into the evaluation of material. That way, you don't gotta like skip around the video. Okay, so the first one we have from Anna, if my memory serves me right. This is the accompanying comment. Checking the Discord here. Okay. Alright, Bono says, didn't post the farm painting last night as I wasn't happy with how it turned out. Did hear everybody's feedback, alright. I can already tell I'm having trouble with the accuracy compared to the reference. I believe this will just be something that improves the more studies I do from life. I also haven't done as much texture work as I would like. When adding details, the subject became busier and harder to read on the whole. Okay, so let me address your comments and then we can actually try and apply some of that with a... So the first part, you're having trouble comparing with accuracy, so you want things to be more reference specific. I believe you have included the reference. Good. Stream as well. That's a ref. On a very slight side note, can we just talk about just how valuable reference accuracy really is? Because for things like bones, especially like stuff on the ribs, for example, you'd be quite surprised just how much leeway you can get away with these kind of things, because nobody's really going to take the time to count the number of ribs accurate. So ultimately what matters most in this kind of design, this kind of painting, is that you're gonna capture the feel of it more than you capture what's actually going on. Because all the time, and I have this problem, I mean, I've recently committed this problem because I was drawing a boat that had a bunch of spines on it, and realized that ultimately when you kind of go into it and kind of lose sight of the forest for the trees, it tends to lower the overall quality of your result, right? Because ultimately you're trying to look for things that are ultimately aesthetically pleasing to look at, right? So like right off the bat, I can tell that you're missing a whole bunch of the design here, right? Because you say, okay, fine, I see ribs, so I'm gonna draw ribs. But you see how these ribs kind of compare to what you have over there on your drawing? A lot of design that's being missing there. A lot of design that's being missed there, rather. Because you have this like awesome shape right there that spikes down and then goes into a slope, and there's a counter slope on the other side. And that's really cool, right? But what we have here is just a box. Right, so we got to be a little bit concerned about these kind of things, and I think I highly recommend, even though my music, I highly recommend just taking some time out when you first get into your drawing, when you select your reference, to just look at the reference and kind of think about what makes that reference good. Like, why did you choose that reference to begin with? Because oftentimes you kind of think something is cool and you just draw it immediately. Not you particularly, but everybody does this, myself included. And you forget why you're even drawing it in the first place. Right? What are the aspects of this that really made it stand out? Because there's always something, otherwise you would never choose a reference. So maybe do a little bit of consideration there and then try to like think about exactly what these things are. So I'm approaching this piece of advice in a different way than I usually would. Because usually I just say, if you want accuracy, jump in, start measuring measurement techniques to accurately delineate your proportions, and that is still applicable advice, right? It's something that's accurate advice. However, since I've given that enough times and I'm sure you've heard it before, I just want to give you an additional thing on top of that, because measurement techniques are very common, and I think I've explained them quite a number of times already. But this is something maybe we don't explain as much, because the design quality of what we're looking at maybe should be retained. So exactly why does this thing look cool? Good question to ask yourself, and then that'll allow you to kind of feed into your focus, because I can't really expect you to focus on everything, right? I don't think I can expect anybody, including myself, to do that. But it's good to think about what are the selling points of your reference and why they are selling points, because that allows you later on to put more effort in that places and actually try to capture it with some sense of accuracy. So you'd spend a lot of time mapping this area right in the center. You know, it's a cool little ribcage, a lot of intricate detail. It makes sense for the focal point to be somewhere over there because of the alternating light and dark shapes beyond just the head. Some thought could be kind of put in accuracy. Moving on to your second comment, you said, I believe this will be done with more improvements. Studies from life is mentioned. There's definitely no secondary to studies from life. Your sense of form and perspective and all these things are rapidly improved from life studies. I just want to point out something. I've never done life studies before. That's what I'm trying to true. I've done very little. So I think like 99.99% of all my study work has just been from photographs or video. So you don't need to. So this is me kind of really stretching here, but if you are kind of waiting for live drawing to happen, you don't need to. You can just draw. At this point, you're gonna, and I would almost approach to say equally. Don't worry too much about that. But yeah, ultimately practice is practice, right? So if you want to get better proportion, just cut the painting entirely, do line drawings, right? Do line drawings and do them accurately. And that's going to give you the most kind of mileage when it comes to accuracy and measurement, because you can't cheat a line drawing. And if you're like me and you prefer shapes, then you can just do very particular selection tool shape drawings, and that's fine as well, I think. I've not seen the second one recommended too much, but it's what I use to get proportion. So I can give you some recommendations on that one. What is the third comment? Third comment is, I also haven't done as much texture work as I would have liked. When adding details, the subject becomes busier and harder to read on the whole. So what this tells me, usually when something is hard to read on the whole, when you start to add details themselves are put in so harshly that you lose the overall hierarchy of the... That's a very common problem, right, with beginners, with intermediates even, that you kind of have a problem. There's a mismanagement of subtlety, and it can definitely be an issue. For example, if I have like little like osteoporosis holes on the side of the bone, I'm only allowed a certain amount of value to use over here that'll make it look like it fits, because the second I do something like this, it's a big question mark, right? Even this kind of looks like it fits because it's somewhat related to this value. Obviously something like that won't fit, right? So just thinking about staying within the local value range is a good place to start, because ultimately you always want to start with that basic 1, 2, 3 read that we talked about earlier. If you weren't there for that stream's actually linked in my weekly assignment channel on my Discord. But the idea that I usually kind of go for with the examples that I provided to you, for example, those ones, I'm basically just sampling lights and darks from my basic form to create texture. So for instance, I know that this is going to be the dark value, let's just say, for this side, which means that whenever I have a hole, for example, that creates some sort of darkness, it's probably not going to be too far away from this value over here, right? It's going to be related. And conversely, the same thing happens over here, right? If there's a protrusion, it's probably going to get the same value as the lighter portion on this face, right? So the protrusion is probably going to get this value. If you follow this kind of general idea for your value choices, you're not going to go too wrong. That's why establishing the big 1 to 2 read is so important. So try to think about what your local is, and then go up and down from there, and that should probably give you the greatest kind of benefit. Keeping things, keeping them fit, making them fit rather within the end. Beyond that, so the problem might not just be that it doesn't fit, but you don't know where to place detail. It just seems a little bit random. The number one rule of thumb is place it on transitions. So, for example, when this transitions from light to dark, or light to dark, or light to dark whenever, or wherever, you want to be putting it there, because light to dark, that transition zone is really where you can start pouring in detail. And how you do it is entirely up to you, right? You can paint every texture. I wouldn't recommend the second one, though. I am a lot more forgiving when it comes to photo textures. But don't start with photo texture. Start with just drawing. And there's no harm with just grabbing some of this, isolating it, and just experimenting on it to see how it works. So maybe we can get into that more specifically if I just do some simple. Just don't draw an entire T-Rex and then say, okay, I'm gonna texture every single part. Might be a bit too much to ask for, but just maybe do a page of bones or something, and then see what you can do with the texture, and then apply that knowledge from that study, right? Because not every study needs to be a finished painting. Very common misconception. How's it going, Melon? Good to see you. Hey, Melon, do me a favor. I might have accidentally triggered like sub-only stream. Could you confirm that that's not the case? Not too much. So I think I've addressed your concerns. We can move on to actually well, points for completion include a reference and line drawing. Alright, cool, Mela, thank you. So let's go all the way to the basic, right? So let's just analyze this stuff from the basic. Half hour, that should be. Let's start from the very beginning, right? So you submitted this to me in terms of your line drawing. Oh, not too bad, not too bad. One thing that I think I want to bring to your attention here, maybe you're not thinking too much about these kind of front faces, because you really want to think even at this stage that this front side and this top side are distinguished. But I kind of understand if you're just going for a basic, like this is in the light and this is in the shadow, because technically this is going to be in the halftone. So I'm not going to be too sad about that. But then again, you have some slight inconsistencies with like this green over here, like this and this. I'm talking about the front face of the cylinder, by the way. They're on the almost exact same angle to the light source. So the question is, why is it not consistent? I'm not saying that you probably got caught this when you were doing a painting, but just in general, right? Logical consistency is a good thing. I like your projection, not too bad. Pretty okay. Thinking about the okay, anything that I want to comment? Perspective actually doesn't look too bad. It looks quite okay. Line over there, maybe the jaw is slightly unhinged. Just use this line over here as a base. So basically, whenever you're drawing two things in perspective that are attached, some way, shape, or form, generally speaking, if it's a hinge kind of attached, because there's so many joints, ball and socket, and a whole bunch of things. It's a hinge, right? What you can always kind of rest assured is that the hinge is going to be a straight line. Nice, simple straight line. And that's a big advantage. Hinge is going to be a straight line like that, for example, right? You know that the bottom side of one edge is going to be the top side of the edge, so if I just draw a square or a cube in perspective, right? So I didn't draw through here, but you get the point. So all I have to do is just follow this particular area and keep that consistent in this, right, the secondary form, and everything from there. This has to be in this angle because I've already set the perspective. I can just set this angle. And you see that kind of fits perfectly. A quick little rule of thumb. I feel like you already have the idea here, for example. And I don't mind the slight little skew. Just in case you're not. That's generally how you make something fit. You always have to trace the perspective back, and it always helps if you draw. Shouldn't set a bad example here. I've asked you guys to. Okay. That's some ideas about this this particular line drawing, but not too bad. I think it's a pretty good job. Lines. Your form painting. Form painting is good. Much better than the final painting. This is probably the strongest piece. So let's talk about some good stuff, right? One questionable thing is this shape over there. What is that? Oh, I see. Okay, that's the scapula. Scapula going around there, like the chest plate. That's interesting. You may have gotten a because this. Because that actually, it kind of encases. But it doesn't matter. Just a bit of observation stuff needs to be. But now that I see what you've done over here, okay. So let's just go down the list, right? So the 1, 2, 3 read, I think, could be improved slightly in certain shapes. Especially this one over here, you can't really afford to get wrong, right? Because it's the main shape of this organization here. So let's just go ahead and solve this issue, right? Again, I said strong 1, 2, 3. Why do I say strong, right? Why is it important? Because clarity is one of the biggest building blocks to make something look good, right? Because if you can't, and this is, I think, the #1 problem that I've ever seen from any beginner, is it's very difficult for them to make a committed decision. I'm not saying you're a beginner, of course, because you're actually pretty decent. I think you're actually higher than some people in my class. But this is one of the biggest problems that plague art drawing. They do not commit to things, so everything ends up to being a little bit too gray, too desaturated, or a little bit too saturated, or all the lines look the same, all the shapes are the same size. Everything kind of resolves itself into this weird sort of very homogeneous soup, and you don't want to really reside in that area. So clarity is a great place to start with. Again, it's just a requirement. For illustration work, clarity takes a backseat to just overall presentation. But I think it's a great idea for
I can't believe
people that are trying to learn form paintings to try and really espouse clarity a little bit stronger, just because it's a good goal to work towards, and if you can make something clear, you can make something not. Goes hand in hand. Okay, so quick little change there, and maybe a little bit more gradation, because I think some of this stuff is actually graded okay, but I don't see a super crazy amount of gradation. Now, why do I harp on this idea so much when I'm doing these crits? The idea is that when you have hard surface stuff in your drawings, most of the time, most of us don't want to do hard surface stuff, right? Because, you know, it's kind of boring sometimes, and you need to know perspective, which most. But you'd be quite surprised just how important these little things, like just general gradation, is when you have a drawing that has a bunch of mechanical parts and organic parts. Your mechanical parts, if the design's not good, my goodness, that thing horribly suck in comparison to the organics, because you just have so little amount of variation of value happening that it doesn't look very good anymore. So be a little bit careful about that. Up the gradation overall. Also, we have some peculiar things over there. I think it's the idea is to have bounce light, which I'm not completely against, right? But I feel like this value and this value maybe a little bit too close, right? So a little bit of a gander on that. I'm trying to. Core shadow not bad. I have a little bit of a question here when it comes to the logic. Also, how's it going, Diaphanous? Thanks for the follow, Alan. Some slight little logical things I want you to think about that's really going to kind of up the roundness situation of your drawings. Be a little bit careful about this stuff here, because it's not very justified, is it? Because this would make sense if it was on the floor, maybe. But even then, I do expect there to be a little bit of bounce light here. And right now, things are kind of gradiating into darkness, which I don't entirely agree with in just in logical sense, right? Because we expect there to be a bounce light from the floor, right? Now, we do see this kind of darkness in some like double bounce conditions, but not in this kind of condition. Let's just go ahead and slightly paint over that. Hard round here. Have pressure. Go ahead and like just gaps. Okay, and now okay, and now we'll make a new layer. I'll grab my airbrush. One of the things that I really miss about this, well, there's a story about why. But the idea is that I have so many of my old presets. Put in if I can. Pretty sure there's a way of doing it. Okay. My airbrush. It's not fast. And nice, but it's massive. Okay. And we grab the bounce light here. And immediately it kind of looks a little bit more comfortable. This is just like random airbrush, right? There's not very controlled gradation. But immediately that adds more of a sense of like roundness. And we can up it even more if we make sense of this gradation over here. So I can just add a core shadow, for example. Very simple addition. Adding a core shadow, and then suddenly now we're kind of teleported to a different realm when it comes to that. Right, this core shadow, highlight, bounce light. This is the thing that you're going to be playing with the most when it comes to making your drawings, making your paintings around, and that's what you really should be practicing, right? So remember, there's a little bit of logic in there. Bounce light coming from the bottom. That's why you have this bounce light over here, which means the core shadow is going to be right over there. And it's important to keep really, really important. Otherwise, things are not going to look the way that you want them to look. Right? I like the highlight here. Nice little matte highlight. Can maybe push it a bit more if you'd like. I'm not going to think of that though. Be a little bit careful about this airbrushing on the outside if you're drawing. It does lower the quality of stuff a little bit. So if you're gonna have these kind of selective, and I do like the fact that it's there, right? I like the fact that you're thinking about the background, but be a little bit careful about backgrounds are super airbrushed around this kind of halo Jesus Christ effect. Just toss that in the trash. You don't need it. The drawing itself speaks for itself. Your values are good. You don't need the help, or you don't need the trick. And if you're gonna do the trick, do it this way. Okay, so grab your airbrush and then you transition the airbrush well into the background so that doesn't look like it's just emanating light. And the reason is because you want the lighting, the effective light, to be on this particular painting. You don't want it to be emitting light. Whenever you have this light against the dark in foam paintings or in any painting, that's one of the reasons why you don't do illustrations on white backgrounds, generally speaking, is because the second you have that piercing the bright value, all the values inside your drawing suddenly are rendered so ineffective. So be a little bit careful about this stuff. So if you have a drawing, it's beautiful, you worked on it, and this applies for everybody, and you have it on a white background, congratulations, you just shot yourself in the foot, because that is messing up your read. Right, same goes for absolute black backgrounds. Your background and your piece, it's not even a difference, your background is part of your piece. Right, so everything you put on the page is part of the page, everything else. So while this is supporting the fact that, okay, it makes this look a little bit more stronger, it's not transitioning well into this other side of the back. It creates this weird halo. Be a little bit aware of this stuff. Easily kind of solve that by not doing it at all. I think your value is so strong on this that it's totally fine to not even. Ambient occlusion is okay. Yeah, not too bad. I see the transition here. Perspective is a little bit questionable there, but I can accept it. Over here it's getting a little bit too dark. I feel like you're maybe losing the confidence that you had over here because you're unsure about what's happening over here. Be a little bit confident about the cast shadow. Cast shadow is going to be quite crisp, right? So crisp up the cast. And if this whole thing is in shadow, then just worry about bounce lights from side. Worry about ambient occlusion maybe. Don't care to having a cast shadow within the shadow because. So again, bounce it a little bit too heavy here. Kind of go with this idea, and you can still go with your idea. I think it'll add the value of the piece. Adding bounce lights just makes things look more real, but bounce lights themselves are not so easy, not just so simple. This value of here is actually directly going into the halftone value, which is not acceptable, right? So be a little bit keep the value separate. Makes it a lot better. And then if you want, go ahead. You can pick this value and say, okay, a little bit brighter than that. It's gonna be. But again, you have to ask yourself the question, sense, right? Because this value would be perspective-wise, another perspective line over here. This would affect there. So this would actually be dark or ambient occlusion. This maybe has an opportunity. Be a little bit careful about that. I'm not saying it looks necessarily bad. I like that you're thinking about it. Just a little bit more focus there. And then maybe overall, we can always experiment, and I encourage people to do this. Experiment quality of your image, and that usually tells you. But for right now, I think everything looks quite natural. Just look at. Sure, I like that. I like yours. It's pretty good. Overall, I know you had some issues with it, but this one, however, now is where the quality kind of drops. We should talk about. Oh. Hi, how's it going? You changed your name on Twitch. Of course, that's what you notice. Getting real lonely on the farm, huh? Alright. So this one we could do a lot too. So I might talk about stuff that's good on your painting, on your form painting, but it's kind of missing over here. So here's your here's what we'll do, because this will be easier because of so this and this look like they're almost been done by two different artists, right? And the reason is because I feel like there's a little bit of translational issue when it comes to what's happening here, what's happening here. I do think that you may have done like a kind of a direct paint over, which is not a bad idea. But I think we could do better. You see, that kind of lack of transition idea is really kind of bugging you over here. We can talk a little bit more about helpful things on the ribcage, but we'll go with the face first. Look at the reference, right? Just so, first and foremost, the forms that you've chosen to represent the reference are way more basic than the reference. So you're already kind of getting off on the wrong foot there, because you don't actually have as many transitions in your drawing for you to add the value in to begin with. So ultimately, you haven't really drawn it so much as you've maybe drawn a couple of shapes and then you've put your your value drawing underneath it, and that's your result. So I think the first thing is I want to ask you to improve, or rather practice on your drawing a little bit, to try and get these forms a little bit more accurate, because if you kind of accurately kind of portray what's happening over here, it's going to be a little bit of a problem. Okay, because right now you've oversimplified stuff to the point where you're missing opportunity to make interesting. So what am I actually talking about there? Let's actually demonstrate. Okay, so I'm talking about stuff like this. I'm gonna do a quick little drawing on top of it. So I'm not gonna try and make it accurate, but I'm gonna try and add a lot of form to it. So I'll start with the center line. I'll start with them. And then quick little duplication on both sides. So I'm with you so far, not too bad, right? Then you have this area in the back. Fine, let's put that in there. I'll know what the perspective is going to be. But now is where we're going to diverge a little bit. Now, there's so many little bumps and lumps that have to be kind of taken care of that maybe are not being taken. So this has been, you basically just straightened out this entire form here, but it doesn't straighten out, does it? It goes maybe a little bit straight, and then it goes bellowing outwards. Ridge there. Is there a ridge there? No, let's actually draw the contour lines. Maybe it'll be easier for you to. So, I draw the cross contour. We're gonna look a little bit more like that, right? And now this is the big part of this explanation that's really, really important. You have to show these contour lines in your painting, and that's what makes things look realistic, right? You need to show contour within your values. And how do you do that? Well, you simply understand what the contours are, and then use light and dark to represent things based on the position of your light source. And we've talked about this, right? We've gone over this in the stream before. But the simple idea is that you have to first understand what something is, and that's where your perspective of drawing comes into play. But then once you figure out, okay, so this is the form that I'm going for, we'll stick with this, right? Even though it's not accurate to reference, but we'll just stick to this time being. This is simple place. So I know for a fact that this is going to be the contour line. How do I know it for a fact? Well, maybe I don't, but this is basically what's happening, right? Call it experience, call it like luck, or call it line, or whatever you want to do, right? Ultimately, this is what I can say most likely is happening there. And even if it isn't, it's cool enough that I'll keep it. So how do I show this whole situation, right? How do I show this in terms of value? Quite simple, right? So the first thing that I like to do when I'm just rendering something from imagination is to think about the position of the light source. And from there, I designate a light side and dark side. Very simple. It's very similar to just drawing something and then designating a 1, 2, 3. So I'm just designating a 1, 3. 1 light and 3. So where would the core shadow be in this situation? Right? It would be here. Considering light from the top, right? Be around here, right? Because ultimately this is just a cylindrical form. Cylindrical form on the side of... What do we know about cylinders? Shadow cylinder. Right there. For vertical lights. So that gives me, with a little bit of modification to account for the fact that cylinder bevels a little bit that side, was a little bit protruding that way, it adds a lot to the way this is being perceived. And this thing that you're designing right now, this shape, it is humongous. Because every little thing that you do with this shape is going to imply different things. The value that you place over here is going to define different things. Maybe go into that a little bit more. So what do I mean? I mean that, for example, let me just change something in this. Let's just change that to this. So I've changed a lot by doing that. In fact, I made it almost inconsistent with your line drawing. But what this basically implies is that it's tapering inward a bit more, right? It's tapering into a point. But if I did something like that, it looks like it's billowing out a bit more. This is just lines, but ultimately what's going to go in here is going to be value. Legion, how's it going, man? So when I actually draw this, now this is where you use your form painting. I can use the form painting as a hint as to what this halftone is going to be, and you've done that, right? But what you've forgotten is that no longer do we have a simplified model here. So I don't just have dark, which is, you know, it's just a dark directly. I don't need to do anything. I also have a light here. The light says if I can be seen, I'm going to be this value. Right? I need to take that value, right, whatever it is, and that value now goes where it would go for a cylinder, for example, or whatever the shape that you've chosen. Goes over there, and that's how you show form in a painting. Right? You think about what it looks like, right? Think about that perspective, right? Figure out what the contours are, and then you express the contour via the values that you've chosen. Very simple example. And that gives me the ridge in this basic kind of drawing of this T-Rex. Right? It gives me that ridge. And then it's just a simple matter of going more and more diligently through the whole drawing and then figuring out exactly what you need. Right? For example, go one more layer on this. You can maybe add a highlight because cylinders have highlights, right? Highlight would go where? So think about this as a cylinder. Where would it go? Go here, right? Imagine it goes here. This is basically how you can start to build up stuff completely from your head. Imagine maybe there's going to be darkness underneath here. Of course, it's going to look a little bit outlined, but you kind of get the idea, right? And this is the real power of this. I can make this bend more by just adding a core shadow, which implies what? What does it imply? It implies that I'm fully breaking from just being hemispherical to being semi-spherical. I'm going here. So if I have a curved, if I have a bump in my contour, if it's just a halftone value, it means that it's somewhere between here and here, right? Which means it's just that. But if I had to add the core shadow value in here, that means that the entire thing is curving all the way to the point where I can actually see the core shadow. Imagine a sphere, for example, right? Imagine a sphere versus a cut sphere or a cut sphere. So if I add this value over here, that means that, oh, curving even more. If I add less value, it's curving even less. And that's the real power of it, right? For example, maybe here I could, you know, perhaps world where you'd have darkness on the side, so add darkness over there. And remember, this is not an arbitrary decision, it's completely by design, right? And that tells me that, oh, wait a second, that's curving so much that it's almost a full cylinder now, right? It's not just, this is the front view, by the way, it's not just this, it's this. This is the key. It's curving inward, which means it's a full sphere. If I have a halftone value over there, that would be right over there. It means I can see this darkness underneath there. So really, really valuable thing to remember. That's a secret right there. Nothing more than that. To make any kind of form painting. Right? It's not complicated. Figure it out. Good to go. So this all stuff with your drawings. So I would suggest maybe if you want, produce a page of sketches of maybe skulls. Evaluation, but it all kind of matters here, right? So example over here, we can just pick anything, right? This is our playground. But how do I make any one of these things look more kind of 3D-ish, right? First of all, I need to look at what it actually is over here. Then I pick something, and I pick this. So I say, okay, this is at an angle. An angle. And this angle is what it's going to be. It can't be this value. Oh, he says I'm looking up. Right? I'm looking up in this value. And it can't be this value either. He's also looking up. It can't be this value. He's looking down. It has to be a halftone. Halftone value. But it's not just that, because you have this little curve in there, right? And now you get to decide what does this curve mean? Is it just a curve sideways in space? Or is it a curve that affects the form? Because if it is, then you have to put this light value in here. Why? Because suddenly I can see the light again. See the light. Does it curve even more down there? Okay, then I can't see the light anymore. Now I can suddenly see the light again. And that's how you make things look more three-dimensional. Right? You identify what it's actually doing, right? And then assign or ascribe values to represent that. Very simple. All starts with your drawing. And I don't mean drawing isn't just line drawing, just don't get confused. Even though line drawing is, like, for example, my school really loves a line drawing, they love it. Me personally speaking, I see the value in it as a learning tool. But this is really the big kicker, right? You need to understand what you're looking at. And that includes how it forms in space, because if you don't get that spatial awareness, it's going to be very hard to paint stuff. How long are we in this? 25 minutes? So I can do a little bit more of a paint over for you. Here's a very simple thing that you've done well in your form painting, but you've not done so well in your final painting. I think the problem, my diagnosis, it does stem from lack of accuracy. Maybe you didn't spend enough time on it. Look at this, for example. That looks so round, but not so much. But really, the answer is right in front of you, right? Because all I have to do is basically ascribe these values over here to this ribcage over here, and then voila, it looks cylindrical. It looks cylindrical. So let's do that, okay? Do that. What's a very quick and easy? We'll do it like this. Multiply. Writer's decision. Wait. I should just do this regularly, honestly. I do need more practice. I make a filter mask. Guarantee mask. This is what I was talking. And now, if my theory is correct, I should be able to just paint in shadow. Yes, I can. What am I doing here? Adding in that core shadow that you had in your drawing, or had in your form painting, but you didn't have in this paint. This is a big giveaway, right? This one. Have that. Got the stripes, you have it there. Don't have it on this one. Adding it in for you. Remember, just maintain that stuff. And this comes with practice, don't worry about it too much. Like, you'll foreshadow there. Bounce light on the bottom. This stuff is really gonna make your work. Kind of get a hang of this. Same place with the highlight, right? Help me all up. Looks so much worse than what I would do just with the direct. The highlight, right? Bounce light from the bottom. The more I do this, the more. It's not that much work, right? A lot of work, actually. Ultimately, once you figure it out, it's whole point of it. Yeah. Add more form there. And ultimately, it's a rough road when you're learning it. Once you're gonna figure it out, then we can maybe talk about texture. Texture kind of relies quite heavily on having a very, because like I said, the biggest problem with texture is that you lose this element of your drawing, and this element's not even there in the drawing at the beginning. Stop it right here. If you like, repaint it. Or my advice is choose something really simple, not so simple that you feel like yourself, but a reasonable amount of complexity, or maybe even multiple stuff, right? Because I was doing pages of 3 when I did this kind of multiples, and we'll just see if the line drawing improves, overall kind of finishing idea improves a little bit more, transitioning from this good form painting to maybe not so good finish painting kind of thing, because ultimately this is the kind of thing you want to be doing, right? So hopefully some of the information here allows you to translate some of that stuff, because honestly this stuff that you've given me before, that stuff's actually pretty one of the better. Okay, hopefully that's helpful. Okay. Next one on the agenda. Alright, we got para. Painting. What is the accompanying comment? Really don't know how to approach this one, Para says in the Discord. I couldn't figure out how to turn my shapes into a decent rendering. I think maybe they were too idealized and too far away from the actual form. Also, the local colors and the shapes were all over the place. I ended up abandoning the values from the shapes, right? And just try to get the lighting roughly correct. I'm not sure if I even did that. Okay, so let's break that down. Let's just address the easy things first. By no means should you stick with the random values, if they are random values that you assign to your form painting. That's just more for your own mileage, because if you're going to do a form painting, you get the most mileage by using values. The reason is because it prevents you from reusing values too much, so you're always thinking. So that's why I recommend doing that. But definitely, if this is dark over here, I don't expect it to be. Okay, so you have an issue with turning your shapes into a decent rendering. So I think your shapes itself that you submitted the on my credit word, it's still pretty good, right? So you're worried that they're too ideal, so it doesn't translate well. Okay. Ended up abandoning the values from the shape drawing and just trying to get the lighting roughly correct. Okay. So we can talk about this. One of the biggest things, let me take a drink of water here. Right after. One of the biggest things that a lot of people go into when they are painting something or drawing something on top of something else or using something else, it tends to inherit a lot of characteristics that maybe don't lend well to the final product. What do I mean by this? So when you use 3D assets, for example, in your drawing, there's a very certain look that you're gonna fight against, because otherwise your work looks very much the same. Amateur or professional, mostly amateur. And the reason is because when you see a super strict straight line, my god, is it hard to not draw. It is, the compulsion is real. Okay, so I do commiserate completely with your position. Let's just talk about how we can kind of slightly break away from the mold. Okay, the first way to do this is to do a line drawing. Okay, a line drawing or a form study, not this kind of form study because this is a simplified version to get your lighting, but maybe the first way is just to do a line drawing of this to actually figure out what all the nooks and crannies are in this particular reference. Okay, because one of the issues is you've done so much hard work on the form painting, and you want to kind of harness that, you want to salvage that and put it into the next painting. But sometimes you're not really afforded a direct opportunity. What I'm trying to get to is that most of the time this is just a lighting reference, but it's not going to always evaluate the ability to just turn this into a painting by just painting over. Okay, what this is kind of doing is it's going to giving you a good idea of kind of what to look for, what to watch out for. But unless you paint in a very particular way, you're not going to be able to directly reuse this asset that you provide. You won't be able to directly utilize it. Like an inherent roadblock there. So the example that I provided to the Discord, the crab, that one was, I was very specific with the way I chose my forms there, and I was very thorough with my forms. So that one could translate really well to just directly making it into a painting. But every other one that I've demonstrated on the stream, Night Girl, Viking Dude, or whatever it might be, all the other form paintings, I did a form painting, and then I just did a painting over a line drawing. Like the parrot, for example. I mean, we're talking about things very abstract. Let's go ahead and... So when I did... let's just take this piece of it. I did this kind of simple warrior painting. Not too bad, right? But here's the form painting of it. Right? And it looks like it's from a different reality. So, what's up with that? Where's this going? So the real moral of the story here, beyond just simple addressing your problems, is that it's really valuable to be nimble as an artist, right? So it's gonna figure out what the value of something is and then just like not sticking to it if it doesn't look very good. So it seems like you've done that, maybe a little bit too late or something, but I'm glad that you did try to make that change. It is important to kind of value of what you've done is over here, and like maybe, or I'm almost most assuredly, you're not going to be always able to just paint over it, and that's not the point, right? So the point, for example, of analyzing this stuff is to say, okay, I'm not going to miss out on AO over here in the neck. I'm not going to miss out on the car shadow. I have a general idea of how the forms play over the light or play over the surface. We'll get to that. That's actually something that will help immediately. Right, so I have a general idea of what the car shadow is going to be like, what the proportion is going to be like. All of these things you're going to resolve in this kind of form painting. Really, painting itself is almost like gratifying stuff. It's not really required as long as you have a very good like understanding of the light. So you can just get away with just doing a line drawing and then just doing your, you know, the line, the math thing I asked you guys to do. I think you saw Bono's math page before. You just do that, you're pretty solid. You can, but it's also hard to be thorough. That's the idea, right? So in brevity, it's just that you're not going to be able to paint over this most of the time. Use it as a tool, but not as a guide, as a strict guide. Your strict guide is this. Reference gives you the lines, and the lines basically means the proportion, the contour, the mass and form, and then you use this as a guide, not only as a guide, but as a notation on how to go about getting that mass and form. Okay. Go about painting on top of this. Let's see if we can improve this overall. So, like I said before, the first thing I want to do here is I want to see if you're missing anything. Are we missing anything? But yeah, a lot of like really important, I feel like, details, especially. Right? So what we can do about it. First of all, even though I do a lot of my paintings without even any, without a single line, right? Paint stuff direct. I am quite partial when it comes to fixes, and just when it comes to this kind of work, I do tend to always go to the exercise of just it's valuable. I think this the overall proportion is fine, right? So we have what are we really missing here to make this. Like a lot of that detail is being lost. Hard there. Edge of the eyes. In your local value. And this stuff is really why I ask you guys value shifts in your own paintings, because it prepares you for things like this. Because now there's no longer a question about how the cast shadow, for example, transitions across the light fur and the dark fur. I mean, you should. Isn't the lighting scenario different from the reference? Absolutely it isn't. That's part of the assignment, right? It's part of the point. It has to be different. No, I stipulate. Otherwise, we don't learn much. That's it's completely by intention. Otherwise, how do we use all this good work over here, right? From the one painting. What is the goal here, right? The ultimate goal is I have this thing, right? I know what it looks like in terms of its contour, I know what it looks like in terms of its texture. I just want to put it in a painting now. I want to make it look real. That's where one painting is really important, because everybody has an aspiration, right? I don't want to find the perfect reference, I just want to make it look good. Concept that's all about, right? Because you don't have a reference for something that you designed as an original creation, so comes into play. We're almost there. Drawing the features here to give myself. So I'm just gonna be painting over all of this stuff, because I don't want to be randomly shoving around values here. That's a big no-no. Gotta go into a place. It's almost akin, and I know you're probably pretty advanced, I feel like, when it comes to as far as comparing to a beginner, right? So you already done a lot of good work. I've seen your work; it's good. But this just, I think, requires a little bit of a gear. I don't know how much work you've done with just understanding maybe form and then no lighting accompaniment, reference accompaniment for lighting. Just straight up, here's a drawing, or here's a design, paint it and make it real. I don't know how many of those problems you've had. Going from the. So again, reiterating, why am I doing this line stuff? Even though I'm a huge advocate of just doing paintings from just painting, just paint a fucking painting, don't do a line drawing. This is because I really want to know what the features. It's a simple way for me to. That I'm familiar with, like rabbits are painted. I could probably do it straight up, but into I skip steps then. Okay, let's just call that. That's okay. Already the overall value of the drawing has gone up, right? Actually, I'm trying to look at it now. But this is your lines, right? So what about the value situation? What about the value situation? This is where the big question arises, and the big answer reveals itself. And it's the same thing that we talked about the last section of the previous crit. It's that identifying the contour rather than the overall silhouette of stuff is fine. But why we really do the line drawing, why we really look at stuff is because we want to be able to figure out stuff like that. Form changes, cross contour. So one of the things that I did when I was kind of demoing this stuff for you guys was I said you should be able to basically place a bit of string or a line or whatever. You should be able to draw a straight line across surface, and you should understand what that should look like. You should be able to tell what that looks like. For example, a line over there looks like that, or a line on the top of the eyes would look like that. Pattern on the skull, maybe around. You should be able to do this kind of stuff. Right? And knowing perspective and understanding or having multiple references will give you a lot of a boost. A lot of boost figuring that stuff out, because kind of figure out what something looks like from a certain angle, like left or front or whatever, and you get an idea, a basic picture of what something is. And then this allows you to be able to start drawing these lines. And why is it important? Because now we realize, especially from that previous demo, that that stuff is pure gold. How do we use it, right? So I know that this particular, let me do this on a different layer here. But I know this stuff looks like that. That's the contour line. And this is very important to realize. This contour exists and it's irrespective of lighting. It's completely irrespective of light. Think about this as a 3D model, right? The 3D model will be the same regardless of how you light it. The base structure is always the same. So that's really what we're trying to get at here. Trying to figure out what this looks like. Because once I can do this, then it goes all the way back to our primitive forms. And I say, okay, that's the form that's right over there. Now what on earth is that similar to? It's similar to, just almost imagine cylinder here, right? Cylinder, you'll find a lot of cylinders in organic shape. Imagine a cylinder over there. Just gonna handlebar mustaching all across. And I know how to paint a cylinder, right? We've demonstrated that in ridiculous detail. So I would know where the core shadow would go from the top. I would know where the core shadow would go from the side. I would know core shadow if it goes from 3/4. I know these kind of things. Because we've done the basic form paintings. This is where you use that information, right? So ultimately in your simplified version, you might have some of this, you might have a lot of this, you might have none of this. But the big thing that the form paint is going to do, assuming your local color is accurate, is it'll tell you what that value is going to be. And even if I can't use this value because this may be too light, the relationship between this and this is good enough. It tells me that, okay, keep it different, what I expect there to be. So it's telling me that the front facing stuff, the half-tone stuff, is going to be right over there. That's going to be the value. And you can ascribe that particular value over here, and that gives you a good paint. Right? I'm not saying use this value. At least tells you that this is basically how it's going to be arranged. Again, use it as a reference, as a lighting reference. Don't use it as a crutch. Be a bit careful about that. So let's go ahead and paint this a little bit. So let's talk about how we can kind of bring a bit more finish. The face is a more complex example. The torso is an easy fix, right? We can just go ahead and do that first. Torso is just cylinder in the reference as well. Here's a big question, right? That's just a cylinder. Why is the core shadow here? Where's the core shadow there? Is it suddenly inch 4? No. Right, so we can make that a little bit better. This stuff is like pretty straightforward, right? Not exactly middle. Over there, I would that. I feel like what happened over there is you looked a little bit too much. You don't need to. You can just make changes like that. Again, I'm just imagining there to be lines across this thing, lines across this thing, I'm developing the shape based on that. Then it's just fundamentals take over. Right, so this is my 1 and 3. Put in my 2 a little bit. There. Foreshadow. Again, you can do texture while you're doing this. You can do texture, you know, that or after that. Just a very clear looking at it. Halftone there. Halftone there. This is already heading in a better direction, right? Talk about the fur when we get to it, if we get to it. The basic idea I want to like start thinking what that cross contour, because once you get the cross contour and figure out your shapes of light and dark, your job's 90% done. The biggest problem is just figuring out what those shapes are actually going to be like. And then it's all about just pushing and pulling your ambient occlusion, your harsh shadows, your overall gradation. Doesn't take that much time. Once you kind of get your line drawing or get your design out of the way, I would almost recommend just turning off your reference entirely. Use it as maybe a textural map a little bit, but don't use it as a lighting ref anymore. Okay, so let's just first of all, I think we don't need to do that because there's a new technique for. So ultimately, what's happening over here? Light from the top. So we know how to handle this, right? Because we already know what the contour lines are. Remember this? This is going to be a cylinder up here. I can do this with that. And this is the big thing, right? Choosing this as my halftone value means that I would get, or as my shadow value right on the face, get something like that. This over here, right? A little bit of a conflict on what is core shadow, what is shadow, what is light. I prefer this because it's a bit more fitting. But since you know this material and this material are the same, we'll just go with it. Shadow, shadow. So what are we doing here? This is just like the 1 and the 3, right? Nothing more. Gotta follow the form here. From here. You're choosing something like so I'm just lighting this from my head, by the way. So it's top left, right? Top left would be one. There. A little bit more over there. I imagine there'll be shadows right over there. You know, on both sides, right? Of course, really important. Local value. Stuff is what really makes things tell. Local value shift there. Just using a preset value adjustment. I am definitely not happy with, by the way. But it gets the job done for now. I'm also not afraid to acknowledge the existence of occlusions. So we don't have too many occlusions in our form paintings. They're very valuable, super valuable. We do have occlusions, by the way. We have plenty of them. Not like that. Finding holes. You have it is in the contact point. Same logic applies over there, right? Maybe a light area, dark area. I usually do this with the adjustment because I spend a lot of time figuring out the forms. So I can just adjust stuff and I'll keep the forms while just making everything light. This is really how I handle texture. Or not texture, but local value vary. Because even though I made that lighter, right? It's still following this basic dark and light principle that I've already established in the piece. One of the simple ways you can kind of make bounce light here to make that look. I don't know if this thing a bit too liney still, of course. Here. But I think a little bit of work on this one. Figuring out those points of AO is it can be fairly useful. I don't think about them too much, but I understand that it's super helpful. And a lot of people actually base their whole drawing style around AO of Asian artists actually. Raiko or Raiko. That's basically what you're missing, right? You need to understand there's a lot of intricate contours, and you're using your lighting reference as basically giving you a good idea how the light's going to play, and the more like accurate your forms are, definitely the more you can directly start using the lights or the values from that particular lighting ref. But otherwise, it's more of a reminder, not necessarily a strict set of. Isn't the lighting reference different? Did I answer this already? Oh no, somebody deleted the comment, I'm assuming. Deleted it, then it popped up. That's how you go about that, right? Really, it's not been that much work, but getting into a better idea. I'm gonna cut this short just so we can talk about texture a bit more. The texture you want to be putting over here, okay? The transition zones. You can make this look even more realistic, by the way, by adding contact occlusion points like that, for example. Basically, these are going to be the only real lines in your drawing. I found really helps. A bit more accurate with this stuff. I think just based on your history, this would have gone a lot better. I feel like in general, had things matter. Knew what you were drawing. So don't be afraid of using additional reference. Okay, so when it comes down to the texture, you add the texture in these transitional areas. Go ahead and finally catch one of your streams. I finally stream. I think this is my first stream in I think. I'm gonna add stuff here, right? Familiarity with the setup because I have well, right over there. That's where you want to add your stuff. Begin with, of course. Then you're gonna transition that into the light and shadow. Panel lights here. You'll have to keep the bounce light in account when the reflected light surface has a dark local value. So when something is black or dark, it tends to absorb more radiation by its very nature, right? Physics of perfect black body and absorbs and emits. Most of the time, darker surfaces are going to have less of a reflective quality, right? It's going to absorb way more than it reflects. So you actually find that when you're talking about bounce light from darker objects, it can even start to lower the value. It can even start to lower the value if it's in the shadow. So for example, I'll give you a quick if I had a cube here down there. So I had a light side here. Side and then dark side. If this ground was dark, you would actually have this area become a little bit more dark as a result of this. It's not really that like dark is reflecting, because that's not a thing, right? Because it's light, it's the absence of light. But you actually see a comparative dip. Now I think I've seen this picture in the Robertson textbook, right? And this has a lot to do with the lack of bounce, dark count bounce, lack of light bounce. So if you have a bounce light on a light surface, like for example, if this was split up, a lighter dark and a darker, this would have a little bit of transition, a little bit, but basically almost nothing. Getting into slightly more advanced stuff, right? But here's the real thing, right? Here's the real thing. You do whatever looks good. So if it's gonna look better for your painting, that's what you do. So while the fundamental is a really good place to start, what I always try to preach is that these are just tools. And so even if something is gonna be very dark, if my painting is gonna look better with a little bit of more bounce light, and usually bounce light just makes things look better, more rounder. It's one of the. So if it's gonna do that, then all bets are off. I'm gonna do it regardless. Because people, it's a suspension of disbelief that can be maintained. Once you become more of an intermediate, you start to really dive into that, and that's how you achieve mastery eventually. Strict adherence to fundamentals, that shit ruins paintings sometimes. So yeah. Which is really funny, right? Because whenever you ask any real, like, any beginner tutorial, they're always going to say, you know, focus on your fundamentals, what's important, but I think that's bad advice to give because people get the wrong way, but your painting is just raw fundies, there's no guarantee it's going to look good. Look accurate maybe, but not good. Not. In design, we have a few pillars, right? We have utility, aesthetics, and we have character, or we have production requirement, technically. But you can have utility, meaning everything makes sense, everything works, but there's no reason why it should look good. So if you consider, so let's talk about the iPhone, right? The iPhone and a cord telephone from the 1970s, they both kind of perform the same function. Bad at making calls, at least the one I have. But the point is that even though they perform the same function, their aesthetics completely different. Cheers, canvases again, man. Big luck. So hopefully this kind of made a bit more sense, Para. So I think your major problem over there is that you were just trying to translate. I can give you a big back. So the major problem here, I don't like how there's so many lines, but the major problem is that you know how to paint forms, but you're trying to like just salvage your form painting too much. Ignore that. Not that you didn't do any work that's important. For example, this thing is directly lifted from yours. Right, the values on this could potentially be lifted, if not the value, at least the shapes are the most important. So this shape across the cylindrical belly, that can be lifted directly, right? But if you want to be able to use this more specifically, then you have to break away. Either do a more detailed block-in, right, or a block drawing, or spend some time with a line drawing and get the proportions and forms, and then think about how those forms relate to the basic forms. And then you can start to think about these values and how they relate to your basic forms. Okay, because the basic form of this is not the same as this. Right? You can't like say I'm gonna just I'm gonna have a portrait, so my 3D blocking for my portrait is gonna be here. There's so much more to it, there's so much intricacy. The more complex your subject matter, the more important this becomes. We're doing animals right now, which isn't that easy. Right? You can maybe get away with a bunch of blocks for like mountain or rock, but when it comes to organics, has to matter a bit more. It's totally true, right? For example, I can show you some of the stuff that I've modeled. Recent stuff. So I modeled a bag. Right, and this stuff is actually, it's pretty detailed. Right? Why? Because the biggest one is it occupies so much space on my. But with this stuff, I don't necessarily need to have this as a complex 3D model, right? I can just do it with which is why I'm gonna put this into a room. This is I put this thing into a room, right? I have no idea where my screenshots went. Oh, I found them. So I'm gonna be putting this into a room. So this is my room. So this is what it is right now, but it used to be just simple, just what I did for these assignments. Actually, I forgot I changed it. Validates my whole point. This is what I'm talking about. Okay, so ultimately a completely unnecessary explanation, but the idea is that if you're going to use something directly, the more complex it is, the more you want to focus on the primitive, get less primitive, use more combinations of primitive. Okay, well, thanks for submitting, appreciate that. Yeah, this is just for presenting the for compositional fixes. Hide all the changes. New 3D model here. And I'm gonna try something new here. I'm sorry for taking time away from the crits, but this is gonna be a lot more. Did a pretty decent sketch for this as well. Not decent, the sketch is awful, but it's way more detailed than I usually do. Always looking to try. A comment I got for this one was that maybe keep the sketch a little bit looser. My ideation. I agree with that. I was just trying something new. What I plan to do, and this is the last thing I'll say about the subject, have these wireframe, these visible wireframe models that are basically just line drawings. I'm just gonna paint over this. Or paint underneath this rather, and see what it looks like. I can do some damage with this. Of course I need to draw over a lot of these like models and things like that. That's a small little detail. I'm gonna just establish the lighting first. I could easily do in Blender, right? I could just import the model into Blender and light it myself. But I'm actually gonna paint this as an illustrationist and see what it looks like. Okay, let's not moving on to the next crit. R. Do you have time for all the experiments? Well, yeah, because I'm submitting the experiment. Not like experimenting on the side, even though I should. Drawing under instead of rendering? Drawing under instead of rendering? Well, the thing about that is that, I mean, ultimately I'm going to be doing that either way. So I've already done paintings where I've lit things using the engine. And it doesn't look too bad, right? But I kind of want to put some of my Nathan Fawkes training to use. And see, because I've drawn over 3D models there, and I used a completely different approach. And the one counter comment is that SCD really enjoys the line drawings, right? They really want lines. So I think I can get a healthy middle ground by, because I can't use this directly, but with a lot of modification. I'm curious, so we're gonna try that. I don't think it'll take me too much more, because when it comes to painting, all of my experience suddenly comes into. Because right now I'm doing line drawings. Anybody's familiar with me, you know, buys line drawings. I did something earlier today, actually. I don't have it on this computer for a number of reasons. Let me get it for you. Need to wait a little bit. I didn't know you could fit so many pieces into Krita at once. Those are references MDM, so anything on your desktop and drag it into Krita. A little pop-up in the pop-up bar. Import it as a reference. It doesn't occupy nearly as much memory. You can't paint over it, but you can manipulate it. You can make it. Think about it as like pure ref, but I can't stand pure ref, mostly because of mine. What's the fun in that? A little bit here, well. Good exercise to do, by the way. I'm like, for my environments class. Asset. Gone okay, I guess. I didn't talk about it much. I didn't talk about it at all, but I had a huge blue screening problem, which I think is because a bolt hit my motherboard on my laptop and shorted something. But my entire laptop was bricked, and I managed to take the bolt out this morning. I lost a lot of progress. Push most things. It's okay. No. Show off something else. Here's something from my VizDev course. Got a lot of shit for this. Because I went against some of the instructions. But it's not bad. I have to admit that a good experiment nonetheless. Anyway, since so going on to the sorry about that. First of all, humongous improvement from the last submission. Thanks for breaking up. Oh, I know why. The RAM issue. Alright, so Azar, let's talk about yours. So, huge improvement over the last week. Definitely a lot of things better. Look at what your line drawing. Yeah, it looks dramatically better. So now it looks more in line with your cubes and your cylinders and things like that you had fully on the first week. There's some questionable ones over there. Almost look like they've been transformed. But beyond that, it looks... Actually, you know what? I remember the shape from the time I drew over it. It actually does look like that. Yeah, not bad. Put the cast shadow in here, please. And do some math if you'd like. For the result. Yeah. I'm not too happy with this. A couple of things to point out here. Right off the bat, radiate your background, please. Oh, and how's it going? You radiate your background. You don't want to put this much time into having a wonderfully detailed drawing and then have your background be so starkly plain that it's staring to the eyes. Also, since again you want to get into concept, little things for the presentation really does. Simple gradient, not too much. Wranglers. It was really good to be able to use my shortcuts again. And so already everything is superlatively better. Or just something a bit darker. But some of this stuff is pretty good. There's some like severe logical issues, like that, for example. I don't know why that's there, but it should be there. Either have everything be a same value and light it from bounce light on both sides, or tangential light if you like. But there's no reason that this should have a shadow up here. Inconsistency. I do believe I pointed it out. In the previous one, that's fine. Another one is don't overexpose stuff. Really big problem. Especially when people first they sink their teeth into contrast for the first time. They tend to hyper contrast stuff, which is not necessarily what you want to be doing. Because again, as a concept artist, you're showing a design. There's no sense in having a design that's just blown out to the point where you can't really sensibly see any detail. So do tone that down, because there's a fine line between, you gotta walk that line between having contrast and having too much contrast. That's definitely a thing. One of the differences between mastery and amateurness is just being able to master subtlety. So while I do like the fact that it's more contrasted, not all that much. Still gives me the read. Doesn't like melt my eyes. Okay. On that, I think these cylinders have been handled exceedingly well. Pretty decent. Besides some logical stuff over there. Maybe the highlight's a bit too close to the core shadow. Makes me a little bit uncomfortable. And also it makes very little logical sense, right? The highlight to be skirting the core shadow. When you think about it, right next to the core is the halftone. Right? And halftone, almost by definition, is turning away from the light, so why would it have the highlight? So be a little bit careful about the logical things over there. Otherwise, some care has been taken over here, not too bad. Edge on the back, maybe that's just because of the way I changed it. A little bit awkward. That would be overall pretty okay. Doesn't make me feel a little bit more, still a bit too uncomfortable. The way that the shape has been terminated. Stuff would add some more darkness in there because Right? You got to think about the fact that if something is going to be turning, and I'll say this 1,000 times because it's true, and because everybody says it, that's knowledge. If you're gonna have a form change, you're gonna have a change, and you're always gonna forget this at some point or the other. Because I forget it, you know, one forgets it can. But try not to, right? Put a post-it note, you know, ask your parents to remind you, tattoo it on your arm, you know, log after it, whatever helps. But there'll be a transition there. There's always going to be a transition when there's a form change, right? And if there isn't one, it's your duty to add one, right? Because maybe the photo is overexposed, maybe it's a bad reference, but if something's changing in space for a design, you want to be as particular as you can be about that, because that's everything in the design. Be something three-dimensionally in space. And of course, away from the focal, all these places you can be a little bit more lax onto, but nobody gets anywhere just drawing flat shit. You've done a very good job of that on these. I think this looks quite natural, pretty okay. Again, questionable with the cast shadow. I would much prefer this to be an AO, a regular old ambient occlusion, because it's not really casting, right? So I feel like even though your spatial drawing has gotten better, spatial awareness it still needs a little bit of ways to go for that. That's okay. The more you do this, the better you get at it. But this stuff is most likely to be like an ambient occlusion. This maybe. That to me looks way more natural. Up it even. How's that challenge going? And over here, which is gonna help. Right now you have an awkward problem of having bounce light against a light surface, so cutting into your read. Some AO there help. Yeah, that resolves that area over there. Same thing over here, right? A bit of a questionable situation. Again, AO helps you resolve this stuff because again, the name of the game is clarity, right? This is an illustration. Illustration, you want to hide stuff. Concept, you want to show stuff. Make sure it follows the form when you do that. That's a very strong tool. You should have the ability on command to make things look separate and to make them look fused. It should be a conscious decision, right? I will hold you accountable to this just because of the fact that prompt was clarity. Remember that the ambient occlusion also extends to the cast shadow. This stuff is going to really help. Adding a bit of darkness in the center of the shadow. Again, less light's going to occupy that area. Same thing for this as a microcosm, right? Least light's going to be in the middle of the shadow. Even that little bit helps push things into a more believable, better. This stuff's not super important in the grand scheme of things. It is important because you need to be more fastidious and tools and the usage of it. But you're not going to be thinking about this like slight transition for organic shapes all that much. But when you do hard surface stuff, this stuff is a gold mine. And people that don't practice this kind of form painting generally tend to suffer in like painting a really believable machine or something. Otherwise, okay. Pretty decent. Do more. Yeah, I'm way happier. Last week week before that. How long it's been. Got Estonian. Pretty okay. A little refresher. Home painting as well. Okay, dokie, I think we've come a very decent way from this. Good understanding of how to translate the reference or translate the form painting. A bit more finished. I don't know how much modification has been done directly on top of it. The result looks pretty okay. So what can we improve upon over here? A couple of things. First of all, finish your work. I think we brought it up the last time, but this is not doing you any favors, right? Because you have particular thing over here. This is super unfinished, super rough, not much done to it, right next to the focal point, and it just makes things look way worse than they need to be, right? So something that's brought up to me a lot of times by my art directors is you need to understand how to transition your detail. That's one of the biggest differences between amateur, or even not even amateur, but intermediate and professional work. So how do you get from intermediate to professional? One of the biggest things is to understand how to transition detail information, design, all these things. Just transition better. Or as my teacher says, transit better, because he's a odd accent. So don't do this stuff. It lowers the quality of your image. It makes all this work here almost something useless, but it does cast an awful light on top of it. I like the detailing here. Not too bad. Again, I wish there was a better transition here. So it's fine to kind of hit that glossy kind of look up. I think overall we could be a bit more consistent with this endeavor. So over here, if this is going to transition like that, I don't see why we can't do a similar thing over here. Transition it in a way that makes more sense to whatever the material is, right? Because otherwise it tends to look more graphic and less like believable in terms of what it is. That to me makes way more sense and starts to look way more believable. Transitioning things is really important. I think something that one of my ADs likes to say is that he says, I'm asking me if I'm still alive. What's it talking about? He says that if you are a good concept artist, you could probably take any design and make it work. Right? If you like staple a goat's head on a lion body, you could probably make that look really cool. Your transitions are good. There's a certain line, which to draw in the sand there, but in general, the idea that is that stuff really matters. And stuff like this over here, like these random lights, no problem, right? You know what would be a better way of doing this? It would be like, if this whole thing, and something that you've done right in your reference, but you've done wrong here, is that your highlight actually gradiates, is good, and that's why that looks so good. But this stuff doesn't gradiate nearly as much, and it really should, right? If you think about it, stuff really should gradiate. Let's see if we can do that. Instead of having this be the same value overall, this is indeed a highlight, right? I do expect there to be rise and fall to it. Check this. Simple change like that just elevates the work. Even though I did it with just filtration tools, right? And just a little bit of that takes the work to a higher level. Because it's not just stenciled on anymore, right? Done with a bit of care, and that care tends to show. Okay, so you've done good work with your form painting, but again, I don't know if I added some. I like this over here. You see, you understand the concept, but it's not translating well into this. So when I see this in one place, I'm probably going to see it in a lot of places. Be a little bit aware of this, right? I'm not going to ask you to like repaint the stuff or anything, but be a little bit more aware of this in your personal work. Let's look around and see, okay, am I losing subtlety by not accurately transitioning some of these things? Because it does really matter. It does really, really matter. Right? Some more notes about this stuff. On the idea of adding in texture, not too bad, right? It's not too bad. What's the reference like? Hair's a lot smaller. You could almost ignore the majority of these hairs I don't mind making like a texture map for this and just bashing things in. I think it's fair for this particular kind of work. Because nobody wants to be sitting there drawing hairs for the end of time. Boring, unforgiving, and stupid work, honestly. So, what you can do to make this look better, though, I'm gonna limit the actual effort. Put it right over here, and blow this up slightly more over here with more light. What that allows you to do is a little trick. More light there, is then you can just focus on the outside contour like you already have. So the only places you're really painting, right there, and right here. Everything else you can leave almost effectively blank. That'll be enough to kind of get you the otherwise, when you start lining things out without a plan, you tend to start to affect the design too much. Because these hairs are all pointing the same direction, they're all the same length. It doesn't look very good. You gotta be careful about that. Everything has to be designed. Something over here, right? A bit more interesting. And weight's different. The length different. Here's a little bit better. Yeah, that's why this looks so much better than that. It's way more even. Here's some thoughts been put into it. I think it's an artifact from the other painting. A bit more tighter, I feel like, with your. Oh, we're sitting pretty good. Here's some mild perspective. I'm not quite sure what's going on there. An eye kind of close to what I assume is the center, but then there'll be one more eye down here, right? Sure, that's just an oversight, but in general, I feel like your fundamentals are there. I do think that you are maybe a little bit lacking when it comes to finishing stuff. Be a bit careful about it. Just put a mental note. Your stuff that really matters. This stuff it reflects on you, but ultimately it's just like random guy getting a crit, right? So it doesn't really matter here. But I hope that the work that really matters, because I'm sure focus on a bit better. Yeah, it just lowers the quality. That's why I get a little bit. I kind of fix it on a bit more, because when I see good work on one end of the painting and I see just negligence on the other side, it tends to shine a bit brighter. That's why I bring it up. Where the sphere is, cylinder needs to be in front of the sphere. For Zar stuff, there needs to be more in front of these ones over here. Yeah, sure. This one over here is like super awkward. I agree with that. If you're talking about this one, then that I think I agree with. This one is fine. Not fine, but this one is a little bit. Also, there's a random cast shadow here. Be a bit careful and be more consistent with your casts, please. Because the majority of the casts are fine, so I think your fundamentals are fine. I think you're just like maybe overthinking things.